Hello to all you guys over in Tulsa at Jinx Martial Arts. My name's Master Todd Wurr, and for some of you it will be a familiar face. For others it will be a new face. But here I am this week bringing you your week's lesson. Hello to Jinx Martial Arts students over in Tulsa, Oklahoma, USA. Some of you will be familiar with this face, some of you this will be new. But I'm going to be here this week to bring you the lesson of the week. And this week it's all going to be about punching. And so a quick introduction to me and myself. I am a 7th degree black belt in Taekwondo, and here I am in a very quiet academy like yourselves. We here in the UK are pretty locked down. So I have a small academy here in Fakenham, Norfolk, east of England. It's right near the coast. Check out on Google Maps, see where I am. So that's where I am, and that's where I'm going to be bringing this tutorial to you today. So Mr. Dunham has asked me to present to you the things that we do with reference to punching and the variety and methodology of punching. So that's today's lesson. By all means, stop and pause me whenever you need to have a go and practice. But other than that, you can just sit back, listen through, and then practice in your own time whenever you feel the need to. So, without any more delay, let's get started. Tension, Churro, Chung Yi, Chumbi. Good. So the first thing is walking stance punch. So I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to be doing this on the spot because I'm limiting myself for the benefit of other classes to keeping a small space. So from here, we're going to step forwards, extend the opposite hand, pull the action hand onto the hip, step forwards, right leg, and do a walking stance punch. And we're just going to do a few of these. It's worth noting in this confined space, I step back to drop forwards. I step back to drop forwards. I step back to drop forwards. Good. Let's talk about this punch real quick. So, why do we twist? Why do we put this twist on the end? The twist at the very end of the technique. It happens at the very end. We don't want to start twisting it early. Okay, let's keep it upside down. Twist it all the way through upside down. The very end of the technique is the rotation, is the jurugi, the twist. We do that because we want to strike whatever it is we're hitting. We want to strike that structure, twist it and break it down. And the more we break that muscle tissue down, the weaker we make it, the more our power penetrates the object. And from a boxer's point of view, they want to be twisting to create fracture in the skin to help gain an advantage in their boxing matches, even though the gloves are quite soft. But in our world, with no boxing gloves, with no padding, the twist is there to just break down the muscle fiber, break down the muscle tissue, and give yourself a bit more penetration. If you imagined looking through a microscope at a bit of clothing, you would see a really nice uniformed web of material. If I then got that material and scrubbed it up and then looked at it through a microscope, then you would look at that and you would see jumbled fabric. You would see the fabric had broken up and become weak. Muscle tissue is very similar. Okay, muscle tissue is sitting very nice and neatly. As soon as you strike that, rotate into that, you will break that up, weaken its structure and allow that force to be penetrated. So that's why it's very important to add the twist at the end of the technique. So let's go ahead and have a few practices at that, making sure we extend and we twist at the very end. Jumbi. So now we're going to look at the pullback arm. Okay. So when you're in a walking stance or sitting stance, I'm going to be doing a sitting stance. The pullback arm plays a very important role in the punch. It helps to create additional rotation. It helps to generate a little bit more acceleration in the punch. Okay, the faster you pull this hand back, the faster the punch is going to want to travel. So just try and make a point of just snatching this. Imagine you're doing a back elbow here, and your punch will naturally accelerate. Have a few goes at that. So the fist on the hip, where do we want to take this fist on the hip? You see a lot of people hold it forward. You want to bring it back sufficient enough to create some tension in the rear of the shoulder and across the back. By applying that tension at the very core of your shoulder, the rhomboids and across your back, by applying that tension you create structure. So at the point that your punch is finished, the structure across your back will create more strength in that punch. A good way of testing this is to get against the punch bag and throw a punch, pulling the hand back this way here, and then holding your hand out there and punching and seeing the difference. You will feel a huge difference. The pull back arm is very important, so make sure you apply that. Okay, I just want to show you the difference in levels of punching. So I've got Bob to assist me here. As we're all trying to keep social distance, he's okay. So he's set up at approximately my own height, and all of your techniques, we presume when we watch you as instructors, as coaches, that you, unless you have a partner with you, if you don't have a partner with you, everything is based on you striking a mirror image of yourself. So in this case, I'm going to get set Bob. He's at my height. There's a big debate about when you do a walking stance punch, you should be punching low to the solar plexus level if you're doing a midsection punch. That's great if the person you're punching equally drops down into a nice walking stance with you. That works fine. So if I had Bob here and I had Bob drop into a walking stance and I wanted to execute a midsection punch, I would want him to drop into a walking stance. But for the most part, that is only applicable when we are practicing with each other, with colleagues in our own school. If you think about it from an application point of view, in the world of protecting yourself, that person isn't going to execute a good low walking stance. So if you set yourself thinking, here is the solar plexus, now I'm going to drop into a walking stance, you're now hitting the fleshy belly of your opponent unless they drop into a walking stance. So you've got to say, well, is that good to practice this midsection punch? Some do, and it's fine. It's you know, if you know Mr. Dunham has supported that, you carry on doing it. But here's just something to think about. If I now punch to the sternum in a stood upright position, I'm punching something that's pretty hard. I'm not going to generate a lot of real sort of stopping power into it. If I now in this position drop myself into a walking stance, I'm now hitting the solar plexus. So that's why you'll see a lot of people have this variation. Some will do a midsection punch in walking stance to the midsection. I'm not sure myself. Others will do a shoulder height punch, which is a midsection punch. And against your mirror image, and somebody that isn't actually going to be dropping into a nice walking stance as you do, now you're going to be hitting the solar plexus. So it's just something to be mindful of. Good. Keep practicing. So you've had a few goes at the punch, and you're working that rotation of the wrist, working on pulling that hand right back to the hip. Let's talk about breath control. Breath control is very important to apply into the technique. It helps create relaxation. It helps to create from that relaxation speed. That speed helps to generate power. So what I want you to do now is I just want you to practice accelerating your breath with your punch. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. So let's just have a few goes like that. In your time. Chumbi. Good. Okay, let's have a look at that dropping, that body dropping, whether you're in walking stance, whether you're in L stance, or in this case we're going to do it in sitting stance. We're looking to lift, pull the hip back, get that chamber right, and punch and drop. Lift, pull the hip back, punch and drop. Lift, pull the hip back and punch and drop. A couple of things to watch out for. Be careful not to let your elbow come wide. Okay, don't let this elbow swing out. Okay, if you let the elbow swing out, a couple of things will happen. One, you will punch from the elbow and not from the hip. And two, you'll encourage the rotation of the hand to happen early. Both of those will have a negative effect to the power of that punch. So keep the elbow tucked back as it comes through, so the rotation happens at the end. And drop. And drop. And drop. So we're looking to drop our body weight at the very point that we make impact. And again. And drop. Don't forget that breath control. Okay, we're going to add hip twist to the technique now. So we're going to rotate these hips. In Taekwondo, every technique has hip rotation to assist in the generation of power, fluidity of movement, so on and so on and so on. And with a punch, what we're looking to do is we're looking to create acceleration. So very much like a whip, when you throw a whip, the core of the whip gets accelerated, the tail accelerates and catches up at the very end. We want to create a very similar effect with that. So I'll do this from the side view. So when we come up, we breathe in, we pull our hip back, and we drive the punch from this hip. As we drop, we drive the hip forward. Okay, and I'm looking to hold my upper body, my shoulders and my hand back. I'm going to let the hip drive forward. As the hip drives forward, I create tension in the torso, and it starts to pull me around, very much like the tension in a whip. As that whip is thrown, it creates tension in the whip, and then the acceleration of the tip of the whip is what generates the power, the crack. We're doing the same thing with a punch. So we're going to drive the hip through here. As you drive the hip, and I'm just trying to build this up so you can see it drop. So up, back, up, back, up, back, up, back, slow motion, drive the hip through, rotate and drop and punch. So have a few minutes having a go at that. Okay, so that's a simple introduction to the mechanics of executing a punch. But we have a variety of different punches in Taekwondo. We have our upset punch. We have our vertical punch. We have our crescent punch. Okay, and we have our full punch. We have our turning punch. We have our angle punch. So these various punches, they all serve a purpose in some form, in some environment. And it's important to understand that no one punch is perfect for one given environment. You just need to learn a variety of punches to have them in your toolbox given whatever situation you find yourself in. So let's firstly look at the upset punch. Now the upset punch comes from the hip, and we're doing palm down. We start palm down. And the reason why we start palm down is to create a little bit of tension in the hand to start with, because it's quite easy to want to relax that fist and create some rotation. Okay? And a close range punch with the arm flexed is better palm upwards. This is a supinated position. Just imagine carrying a bowl of soup, and that's a supinated anatomical position. So it's more natural for a hand to finish at this range, close range, in this position. So upset punch, that's why it's designed for close range techniques. And you're looking in for the kidneys, you know, close range floating ribs, that kind of punch. So we want to start in a pronated position to end in a supinated position, palm upwards. So palm down, pronate, palm upward, supinate. Okay, this is the action we're going to apply. We start down to aid the twist. Okay, so we're still applying the the fist twist, the jurugi and the twist. Okay, we're still applying that. We're going to apply hip twist in the same fashion. It's going to be accelerated here. So I want you to go ahead now and practice that in walking stance. I'll just demonstrate a couple from the side view. So I step back, turn the palms over, and then forwards. Step back, turn the palm over, forwards. Step back, turn the palm over. Now you'll notice I'm doing what appears to be a rotational movement here. Okay, so here it's a rotational movement. It's actually not. All I'm doing is I'm keeping straight up and down. I'm keeping straight up and down. But because of the twist of the wrist, the twist of the hips, it makes it look like I'm doing a circular motion. The hand has actually stayed in the same place other than just lifted up and down. Okay, it's up, rotates, round, and from this position here, that's where it twists and the hips accelerate it. So have a few goes at that in this position here, forwards, 1, 2, 2, 2. So I'm round. As soon as the hand comes past the hip, I accelerate the hips and I punch that upset punch through. So, enjoy having a few goes at that. Okay, we're going to look now at the vertical punch. Now the vertical punch travels a little bit further. So we've had the upset punch close range, we've had the full distance punch long range. We're now going to look at the vertical punch. And the vertical punch is a mid-range technique. So that's where we extend the hand. The elbow is now going to come past the line of our body, the vertical line of our body, and the hand is going to stay relatively vertical, hence the vertical name, vertical punch. Okay? So, the way we're going to execute this is exactly the same as the upset punch. It comes back, okay, and comes to the hip, but from the hip here, turn the hand upwards, back palm upwards, as if you're going to execute a normal punch, because this is going to rotate in to a vertical position. Rotate into a vertical position. Upset punch was the opposite, this way to here. Vertical punch is the same as you would do a normal punch. Take it out and rotate at the very end. It's the familiar 1-inch punch method. Obviously we extended it from the hip, but that's the position that you're in. So you're looking to rotate the hip the same as the others, accelerate it in advance, pull the hand out, twist and stop at a mid-range level. So let's have a few goes at this, and we'll do the same thing in a backward stepping forward motion. So we're going to step back here and step back here and back, 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 back. So you'll notice with this forward step I'm landing hand and foot at the same time. Okay, that's what you're after doing. Hand and foot lands the same time. Have a go at that. Good. Okay, we're going to look at the crescent punch. Now the crescent punch is a shorter, long range punch. It's not fully extended, so we've not fully extended to a full position. It's slightly off full length. And what we're going to do is we're going to extend the punch exactly the same way. Start with the fist on the hip. We're going to extend the punch, keep the fist upside down. Just prior to the rotation at its extension, that's where you rotate the fist. Okay, so a crescent punch comes, drives forwards, but just ends in a slight arc. So we'll just have a few goes at that, and we'll do this as a reverse technique. So we're going to step backwards to go forwards. Step backwards to go forwards. Same thing, we're holding the fist back until we're about to land, and there we execute the rotation. Not full length, just off full length, crescent punch. Now, there's a few slight variations of that crescent punch that it's always worth practicing. Obviously, most of you that have got your early grades, yellow belt, green belt, will be familiar with the twin vertical punch. There's a good example there of the twin vertical punch, because if your hands go beyond that midway position, anything from there on in, the hand wants to naturally turn. It would be very uncomfortable to punch that way. It would be equally very uncomfortable to punch this way. So we use the mechanics of our arm to better suit what punch we apply. That twin vertical punch, that's a kind of a variation of a mid to long range technique. And you can start from a twin vertical position here. Okay, that's a close range one. If you're coming into the floating ribs, okay, and as you extend up to maybe striking the head or cheek, you want to allow those fists to rotate a little bit more. It kind of takes the fist off the vertical plane, so it breaks the name of it a little bit, but it just supports the extension of the arm, the extension of this arm. The further you put that out, the more the arm wants to rotate. So you just got to support that a little bit as you go longer to let the fist rotate. The other thing is in the cheeks, it allows the fists to hit at a nice line into the cheeks when you're using a twin vertical punch. The other thing to be mindful of is the position of the wrist. And that comes in when we're talking about turning punch, hooking punch, and angle punch. This hooking punch, whenever you do a hooking punch that is close range, you want the palm facing in. Okay, you want the palm facing inwards. And that's because the structure of the wrist has stability at close range impacts. So if you're in close and you've got to do a hook punch at this close range, make sure the palm is in. But here's where it changes. If you find that you're now starting to reach out and you're now trying to hit a target that's further away, you've got to switch that. So you don't want to do a hooking punch with the palm inwards at long range. Now is where you change it, and we start to go through that motion of the changing the position of the fist. We go from supinate here up over to pronate. Well, if we're going long range, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to roll the fist right the way over. Because we're bringing this in and across and it's swinging, okay, it's not driving forward like a crescent punch. Okay, so a crescent punch comes, drives forwards, but just ends in a slight arc. We're swinging this technique. This technique is coming round and wide, but it's going to be a long way away. So what we've got to do is we've got to rotate the fist all the way over to the point of impact, so that the point of impact, we've actually gone palm away as opposed to palm in on the close range hooking punch. Long range hooking punch is now palm away. The reason for that is the impact against this wrist will support the punch and the wrist much better in this position. And you're also able to hit with the correct attacking tool, the two knuckles. If you do a long range palm in hooking punch, you run the risk of catching the mid set of knuckles, and what that does is that causes the wrist to buckle. Those of you that have worked on a punch bag, you'll get to feel, if you do a long range hooking punch where you're leaning into that, you'll catch that knuckle and you can buckle the wrist. Turn it palm outwards and you'll create a much stronger line through your forearm. So that's just worth being mindful of them. So turning punch, that wants to finish center of your chest, and it can be done palm inwards or palm downwards. So both of those can be executed palm inwards and palm downwards, subject to the patterns. I know some of you have got slightly different patterns, so you can execute that. Just check with your instructor which one it is. Is it palm down turning punch? Is it palm in turning punch? More often than not, it'll be palm down. So this one is just executed, and we'll do this one in walking stance, stepping forwards. And again, we'll do it as a reverse punch. So you're stepping forwards here, finishes in center line of your body. Switch it up to high section. Again, all center line of your body. Don't forget the hip twist. Accelerates that technique. Don't forget the breath control. And so on. I'll leave you to practice that. Okay, let's look at the angle punch. The angle punch is executed where it finishes at the side, and it's the same action as the turning punch. It doesn't go up forwards and lift the elbow up. A lot of people do that, which would be a great forearm or elbow strike going in this direction, but it's not going to be a very good punch in this direction. So you gotta let the hips rotate around, let that fist come out, and generate a wider rotation of the fist, and then bring that in. The wider you can generate that without breaking it, don't let it go too straight, but just extend that hand just slightly, extend the elbow, bring that in and pull it across to finish opposite of your shoulder. Okay, that's an angle punch. Let's have a few goes at that, and we'll do that again in walking stance as a reverse technique. These can be done obviously obverse technique as well. So you look into that finish in line with your shoulder. Again, another close range technique. So let's change hands, let's do it as an obverse technique. Don't forget those hips. Switch it up to high section. And so on. Good. I'll leave you to practice that. Okay, guys, great to have this week with you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there's a few things in there for you to take away and practice. Big shout out to Mr. Dunham for inviting me over to set this week's lesson for you. If you have any questions, throw it over to Mr. Dunham. If you want to contact me, find me on Facebook, PM me. If you've got any questions you want to go through, if you're not sure about something, if there's something there that was confusing, Facebook is a marvelous thing. I am literally fingertips away. So give me a shout, ask me the question, happy to give you any more information. At that point, enjoy yourselves, keep safe, keep practicing, keep healthy. We'll see you soon.